You're listening to BLAXIT RADIO with on-air personalities in Costa Rica, Panama, Mexico, and Tanzania. Playing smooth jazz, quiet storm, R&B, reggae, and the very best talk, 24/7.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to BLAXIT Radio and our first BLAXIT Radio joint. My name is Devin Austin, AKA the Divine Miss D, and my show is This Is It, Straight Talk for the Blaxit Community. Today, I'm joining forces with my co-host, Charlotte Van Horn of Black Expats in Panama, along with two attorneys, and we are doing the first of a two-part Costa Rica versus Panama roundtable, where we'll be discussing the similarities and differences of living in Costa Rica and Panama. So without further ado, let's welcome Charlotte Van Horn to the show.
Well, thank you, Madame, for welcoming me to the show. And I'm so excited to be here with you. You're such a smooth operator. And my name is Charlotte Van Horn. I am the host of Black Expats in Panama. Our show airs every Sunday at 2 p.m. Costa Rica time. And I'm just really happy to be a part of this conversation. It always comes up, very often comes up if people are thinking about Panama, they've already thought about Costa Rica, or people are in Costa Rica, they've thought about Panama. And we just decided to get together and figure out how people come to these decisions to decide whether they're going to move to Costa Rica or Panama. So we wanted to start out with the whole legal side of things, because those are a lot of the questions that come up have to do with, have a lot to do with, how am I going to get my residency? How do things work and things like that? So I am going to, I'll introduce Giovanna. Giovanna Bernal is with Prime Tax and Legal Solutions in Panama. She is a dear friend to the Black Expats in Panama community. Giovanna has served, oh my gosh, she's probably about to hit 100 members in our group with immigration issues and also corporate statuses and whatever else they need. She is just a very good friend of the community. And I'm happy to have you here, Giovanna, and just go ahead and introduce yourself.
Many thanks, Charlotte. Thanks, Devon, for this invitation. I'm so excited to be here this afternoon. We have a firm called Prime Solutions Tax and Legal, and we guide expats and individuals that want to relocate to Panama, and with their visas, their status, if they want to open a bank account, guiding them when buying a property with the legal matters, and setting up their business with related to setting it up, and also the accounting and tax services.
Thank you, Giovanna.
And our second attorney is a friend of mine and a great attorney here in Costa Rica. A lot of the expats use him, and his name is Rafael Valverde. And I will turn it over to him to give us a short introduction of himself. Rafael.
Thank you, Devon, and also Charlotte for having me over, and Giovanna also for being here today. My name is Rafael Valverde, and I am an attorney and the CEO of Allier Legal Services. We are a firm dedicated to assisting expats or foreign nationals relocating to Costa Rica, and recently, similarly, also in Panama. And we also focus a lot of energy in assisting people obtaining documents from other countries, documents that are required for residency processes. So we're incorporated in the United States and in Canada. That allows us also to be part of this big process of helping people move into another country.
Okay, good.
Welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Well, Charlotte, you want to kick off the first question?
I
First
do.
topic? Okay.
So let me just kick off the first question, and we'll start with Giovanna, and then go to Rafael. And the first question is going to be about entry requirements for U.S. citizens. And if you could just touch on some things about the requirements with the passport, the number of days permitted to stay, how to renew, overstaying, and just some of those things. Could you help us with that, Giovanna, for Panama?
Sure. This is for U.S. citizens. So I will focus, whatever I'm going to speak is about U.S. citizens, right? U.S. citizens, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So in this case, U.S. citizens have 180 days to stay in Panama as tourists. That also applies to Canada. And besides that term, there is no extension because that would be the maximum time in order to be a tourist. If you stay for longer than that, then you might become even a resident for tax purposes. So consider that you have only 180 days. And if you stay more than that, there are penalties. The penalties are $50 for each month. But I believe you have plenty of time to plan to relocation and also start planning for your application for residency.
So I guess next would be Rafael for Costa Rica. If you could talk a little bit about the requirements for entry into Costa Rica and a little bit about the number of days and renewals and perpetual tourists, basically.
Absolutely.
If there are any penalties.
Penalties. All right. Thank you. On Costa Rica, for U.S. nationals, the entry requirement, people must have a passport. That's obviously like a valid passport, a very basic thing. Also, a return ticket. And also people need to demonstrate. This is according to the law, so the people must demonstrate like a solvency. They must have like a means for being a tourist in the country. This particular requirement for solvency, for demonstrating money or cash to pay for the trip during Costa Rica is generally not enforced. Nevertheless, it is in the law books. But mainly what immigration officers focus on is having a return ticket. The validity of the tourist visa for U.S. nationals is up to 90 days. It is not automatically 90 days. The immigration officers, they have discretionary power to grant lesser amount of days. This is an important detail because a lot of people assume that they automatically will get 90 days. While most of the time that's the case, it is not 100% of the time. Then it is not possible to extend the visa. It is just 90 days and that's it. Then the person has to leave the country. And something that you mentioned, Deb, on a key phrase is perpetual tourist. So what that means for the people listening or watching the show is that once the 90 days arrive, people can leave the country and then come back in, and then they can get another 90 days. There's not under the law, there's not a maximum amount of time putting a cap on how many times people can do that. There has been people in Costa Rica that have been a quote unquote perpetual tourists for 10 years, that they've just been doing this, like going to the border, either Costa Rica or Panama, Nicaragua or Panama, and they cross the border into Panama or Nicaragua, and then they come back in. Then for overstaying, there is a penalty, which is, there are two options of the penalty. One is paying a fine of $100 per each month that the person overstayed. The other option is banning the person from re-entering the country for a period of time 3 times equal to the overstay period. So that means that if somebody overstayed 1 month, they cannot come back to Costa Rica for a
3
period of
months.
3 months. An important note about this is that currently the Costa Rican government is not enforcing these penalties. So generally these penalties or under the law, these penalties are to be enforced when the person is leaving the country. But because the government is not enforcing the penalty, so people can leave the country and they're not going to be penalized. And an important note that something that has been happening a lot recently, particularly people trying to cross the border into Panama, is that Panama, the immigration officers in the Panamanian border, they are not allowing foreign nationals from Costa Rica to cross into Panama because they caught they caught that a lot of people, foreign nationals living in Costa Rica or perpetual tourists, whatever the case might be, they're just crossing the border to update the Costa Rican visa. And then the Panamanian immigration didn't like that. So then they're returning people to Costa Rica. And the problem with that is that once they are back to Costa Rica, since they never left Costa Rica, they're putting deportation proceedings. And then those penalties are more severe. Somebody that is deported cannot come back into the country for a period of 10 years.
Wow.
So this is to answer your question about entry requirements, penalties,
Right.
and extensions.
Okay, and I would just wanted to clarify one thing too. So in Panama, you don't have to have a return ticket when you come in, is that correct?
No, in Panama, it is also important to have a return ticket.
Okay, you do have that.
Yes.
Okay.
And also prove some sort of income.
Income.
Normally, they want to know that you have credit cards. The minimum amount is $500. But they have like an interview when you enter the country at the airport, and they will ask you some questions. So they are very well trained to know. So sometimes they ask you, sometimes they not, but the minimum is $500.
Now I did notice something when we come into Costa Rica is that they always ask us where we're staying. So I don't know, is it required, Rafael, that you have a location already in Costa Rica, like a hotel or a home or something already? Because I know they always say where are you going?
Yes, they always even in my case as a citizen, and they ask me two things, where am I going, where am I staying, and what do I do for a living?
And what do you do for a living?
And sometimes I joke, I might make something up like I'm a clown, and because I find it weird that they will ask what I do for a living. I think it's inconsequential. But anyhow, going back to your question, Devon, indeed, it is a requirement to report where you are staying. So people need to have readily available an address, the hotel and it doesn't have to be all of the hotels, and people who come as tourists, they might go to 5 different places. They just need to provide one address. And if they ask what is it that they do for a living, just explain, what is it that they do for a living. Something important also about entry requirements is that at least in Costa Rica, there are these two elements. One of them is that Costa Rica checks Interpol database. So there might be people that have certain convictions or felonies or that they might have something pending somewhere. It will come up in the Interpol database. So then they might be returned. So it is important to keep that in mind. It doesn't happen very often, but it happens. I mean, out of the millions of people that come into the country, and the chances of that happening is less than 1%, but it happens, and they enforce that. And another one, but they do not enforce this, is that for matters of public health, everybody should have the full schedule of vaccinations on the Costa Rican law, but they do not ask for that. So it is in the books, in the law books, people should be vaccinated for measles and chicken pox and other things in there. But they never ask for this requirement. But under the law, it is, and this is not immigration, this is health. regulations, it is required for people to be vaccinated.
Okay.
I've never been asked any of that. I've never been asked. I mean, I don't think that we're not talking about getting residency at this point, right? We're talking about coming into the country.
Yeah, it's
Correct.
coming into the country.
I have never ever, besides coming into Panama, because I'm a foreigner living in Panama now, but I've never been asked about money. I've never been asked about how much money I make ever. Like as far as my solvency to visit, the only thing that Panama has ever required to know prior to me becoming a resident was what that return that I had a ticket to return. You know, that I couldn't come in on a one-way ticket, but they never asked me about any money or any solvency. And I don't know if they've never asked me about background check either. So
no, they check they check their computer for your background. In Costa Rica, they don't ask you for it.
Yeah, so it's a random thing. Okay, I never heard of that. Okay.
And Rafael, I think too, like it seems like that there's a difference between coming in on a flight and going across the border, like if you're going to go to Nicaragua or something like that, if you're just on land, because it seems like that I see that requirement a little bit more like if you're doing a land border, like the money thing, about if you have so much money in the bank or whatever, but at the airport, which is why I like to fly, at the airport, they never seem to give you any problems with anything like that, bank accounts or anything like that.
Yes, I would say that that's correct. I noticed a similar thing. At the airport, they generally do not ask for the money requirement, and at the border they do, and then sometimes even they just want to see cash.
Right.
You know, but how often does it happen? You know, like not 100% of the time, but they are more inclined to do so at the border. And when people are doing a border crossing, they need to demonstrate also a way to get out of the country. So they will want either an airplane ticket or a bus ticket showing that the person is getting out of the country.
Right. Okay. Any more questions on that particular topic? Anyone?
Not for me.
Okay.
No.
So the next topic is about pets. And I know that in the group, I actually had my pets shipped over here after we were here. But if you were going to be coming into the country with pets, can you give us a little bit of a background? We'll start with Costa Rica. Can you give us a little bit of information as to the legal requirements or what they require for entry into the country if you're bringing a pet with you?
Okay, and absolutely. So the let's start with this, because like people have all sorts of pets, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are, let's say, traditional pets and non-traditional pets. So starting from there, like a protected species, it is not possible to bring into Costa Rica legally. Like they will put the animal to sleep. So Costa Rica and not only Costa Rica, there are many countries. I don't know how many signatories are to this. There is a CITES agreement. CITES agreement is an international treaty that actually was promoted by the United States to regulate endangered species. And so Costa Rica is a member of that treaty. So it is not legally possible to bring a protected species into Costa Rica. There's people that might have, I don't know, like a bird, you know, or a reptile or whatever other thing. Again, like people get sometimes very extravagant with the choice of pets. And but then there are like the regular pets that people have, like a cat and a dog. Those are obviously the most popular, pets. And for that, it is basically required to get a health certificate issued by a licensed veterinarian, and the licensed veterinarian since it is licensed, this health certificate for the pet is going to be endorsed by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Plant and Health Inspection Services. So that's the basic requirement. Depending whether it is a cat or a dog, there might be some vaccination requirements for the animal. So it would be the health certificate might incorporate that, or people might provide evidence to that. But it is important that obviously for protecting the population of animals living in the country, to make sure that the pets that are going to be brought into Costa Rica are going to comply with the whatever schedule of vaccines or deworming or any of these. At home, let's in the US, the veterinarian is not going to be able to issue the health certificate unless the animal complies with some of these schedule of vaccinations or deworming medicine, so on and so forth.
But no quarantine, right?
No quarantine. It is not required to do quarantine.
Giovanna, is Panama's about the same or?
Yes, it's very similar because in Panama, the US citizen that has a small pet, I'll focus on the small pets like Rafael mentioned, not the other ones, which is the most common ones. You need to get the health certificate for exportation at the US Department of Agriculture. And that has to be legalized by the nearest Panama consulate before bringing that document. And we have a form from the Ministry of Health that has to be filled. It's just that for a home, what we call home quarantine, but it's not like the pet will stay at the airport or something like that. But it is very important to do this process before the pet will enter Panama. Because I had some cases of some previous clients that had this matter and they had to solve that very quickly because you don't want your pets to stay at the airport with a quarantine. So you have to do this type of process.
So do you need a lawyer for that process?
No, because the health certificate that is, the produced in the U.S. department, and also it's certified by the pet's veterinary, and then legalized by the Panama consulate. We can assist on getting it legalized if someone needs assistance, getting in contact with the nearest Panama consulate. We have several ones, but then the process is done most of the time directly, but we can guide the process.
Giovanna, I just wanted to clarify, is there a quarantine time in Panama for your pets, for your regular domestic pets?
No, as long as you do the process, getting the health certificate from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, there is no quarantine done at the airport.
Thank you.
Okay.
The next topic is the residency types. And could you just give us a basic rundown on applying for citizenship or residency and what the requirements are? I know there's a lot of different ways to do it, but basically.
For residency, you're talking about?
Yes. Yes. Okay. Well, for Panama, in the case for U.S. citizens, once someone becomes resident, there is a period of 5 years that it has to comply in order to apply for citizenship. Citizenship is becoming Panamanian and getting a Panamanian passport, and the residency is what's first. So the process of citizenship is takes quite a while, takes several years to get it after the 5 years, right? But the very first process that someone wants to do before is the residency. So once someone enters the country as a tourist, the most popular type of residencies we have in Panama, my experience right now is the pensionado visa is for retirees, as long as they have a pension letter with at least $1,000. We have also the Friendly Nations visa, where United States is part of it, and they can be proved by an investment of $200,000 on real estate, paid in cash or by mortgage, by a bank deposit, a fixed term deposit with the amount of $200,000, and by self-employment in a Panamanian corporation, by getting a job and finding a work to do, or by being employed in in a Panama corporation doing business in Panama with a minimum salary of $1,000.
So when they come to Panama, they have to, when they come to Panama, like say to start that process, they have to have the background check, right? That's part of it too?
Yes, that's the main document that is very mandatory, is to bring the criminal background check, and it has to be from the FBI.
Mhm.
I will mention that those two type of residency, the pensionado and the friendly nations, are the permanent type of residencies, but we also have temporary residency options, and there is one that is hired by a foreign corporation like a US LLC, and that US LLC can hire you and you can have a temporary permit for 1 year, and also the digital nomad visa that is for 9 months. It's a
Are there
short-term-
different amounts of
short-term visa.
money that you have to have for single people as opposed to couples for the temporary residency? Giovanna?
Yes,
Yeah.
there is a bank account with $2,000 is what.
So
most
if you're
people do.
single or if you're married, it's the same, it's 2,000.
No, it's single, you just have to show the requirements for the application. It's when you have dependents like husband or wife or children, you have to show at least $2,000 on a bank account. And if you're pensionado, at least 250 for each dependent.
In addition to the 1,000 for you.
Exactly.
So if it was a husband and a wife, it would be $1,250. You'd have to show at least $1,250 on your
Oh, if you had
pension.
one dependent, right? Is that what you mean?
One
Exactly.
dependent,
One
okay. But your wife, your spouse counts as a dependent, right?
Oh,
Exactly.
Okay.
And children up to 18 years old. And after 18 to 25, they need to be single, and also they need to be studying at university full time in order to be dependent until 25.
Okay.
Mhm.
Rafael, can you tell us about the residency types, temporary residency types, the most common, and what it takes to apply for those?
Thank you, Devon. There are, well, the most common are similarly the retirement category with the same amount of income of $1,000 in a pension. It is the amount does not vary depending on how many people are in the family. It stays the same. You know, like $1,000 will cover an entire family. There is the investor option as well that requires a minimum investment of $150,000. That investment can be in multiple options. It could be in real estate. It could be in other type of assets, you know, and it could be a business. People could invest, you know, can put the money perhaps in through a company. They can invest the money in securities in Costa Rica. It's very, very flexible, but as long as there is an investment of $150,000, the person will meet that requirement. There is a category called rentista. Rentista basically means income. In Costa Rica, it's like having some sort of annuity, something similar to that. And the minimum income requirement for that is $2,500, and similarly, it will cover an entire family. The fixed same amount will cover an entire family. Then there is, these residencies are based on an income or investment. There are family-based residencies also. Somebody that will marry to a Costa Rican national, or foreign nationals that will have a child born in Costa Rica. And then there are also employment categories. The employment categories can be divided in two categories. One is that are being employed by somebody, another one is being self-employed. This is an option that is not very popular in Costa Rica. A lot of people do not know about it, but it is very, very flexible in the sense that people that are, again, like a self-employed, they will have some skill, you know, something very specific that they will do. They will be able to obtain this type of residency in Costa Rica. These are the most popular types of of residency. Something peculiar about residences in Costa Rica is that basically it allows to bring the entire family. So if a person or a couple, would like to bring their parents, and to Costa Rica, it is possible to do that. They qualify under a different category, but nevertheless, let's say a married couple with 3 children, and they have their parents that they would like to bring, they will be able to bring the entire family. And those parents, they will qualify under a different category, wouldn't necessarily be residency, but it is a category attached to the residency. So it is very, perhaps very extensive.
I know what a lot of people are looking for right now is the digital nomad. But is that been launched, the digital nomad residency status?
It is active. It started I believe in this month of September, when it became active. It's very, very new. But something important to clarify is that it's not a residency. The digital nomad is designed for short stays for up to 2 years. So if somebody's planning on staying in Costa Rica for indefinitely, for a long period of time or indefinitely, the digital nomad will not be the right type of category, because it is valid just for 1 year, and then it can be extended for 1 additional year. After that, the person will have 2 options: either leave the country or apply for one of the other categories of residency.
Okay.
So Giovanna, right?
Yes.
Is it getting traction? Do people find it useful, or?
I see some people that are interested, but I haven't submitted one yet. I will in the next couple of weeks. Someone that works for the US government and he wants to apply, and another one that also works for the US government that they can work remotely. They are interested because then they can have a way to work legally, not just as a tourist, which doesn't look nice. So, but I see more people looking for residency, like Rafael mentioned, because yes, the digital nomad is just a short-term visa that just give you 9 months, and then you have 6 months to stay as a tourist, and then you have to reapply again for another 9 months. So if you're really looking to relocate and stay and make Panama your home country, it's better to apply for residency. But there are some cases, especially young people and people that have remote jobs, that they do like the idea, because then they can stay for a short time in Panama, and then maybe they can move to Costa Rica, or they may jump to go to Europe, because now it's very popular, this type of visa, the digital nomad, right?
Oh, that's interesting, because I got the idea that it was a type of residency, and I think some other people might too. So thank you very much for clarifying that for both of you.
To become a permanent resident, it is required to be a temporary resident for 3 years. It is, while permanent residency is an option, it is not mandatory for people to become permanent residents if they would like to become citizens. To become a citizen, the period of time for residency, the requirement is 7 years. So basically, people will have 2 options that are obtain the temporary residency, and one option is to keep the temporary residency for 7 years and then apply for a citizenship, if that's what they would like to do. Or they can apply after 3 years of being a temporary, they can apply for permanent, and then in a combined period of the 2 residencies, a combined period of 7 years, so then they can apply for citizenship. Whether to apply for permanent residency or not, it is I'll recommend it just for some practical purposes, that people who obtain a temporary residency, they need to keep that main requirement that originally qualified them for a temporary. So if it is, like an investor or an investment, so they need to keep that investment And if it is the rentista having that income of $2,500 per month, so then they need to keep that. They need to keep demonstrating that income for the life of the residency. And for instance, let's say somebody that will get married to a Costa Rican, so obviously to keep the residency, they must keep the marriage. And obviously the idea when people get married, they get married forever, right? But then the thing is, in a scenario or in a residency like that, if something happens, like the spouse passes away or they get divorced, so then that qualifier for the residency will go away too. So then the permanent residency, when a person obtains this residency, it's not required to demonstrate that initial eligibility requirement. So that's why I would recommend it, to just for that practicality. And also another important one is particularly for younger people, is the ability to work. Sometimes people do like to get employment locally, and some of these residencies have the restriction that do not allow people either as a retire or investment or rentista. They're not legally allowed to get a job. So then that limitation will be lifted once they become permanent residents. This particular limitation obviously wouldn't be applicable for people under other categories like self-employed. Naturally, it is an employment category. Parent of a Costa Rica is a permanent residency, so then they don't have these restrictions.
Okay.
Giovanna, it sounds like a long time compared to what the Panama experience is, but I think maybe it's just what we call it, because I think in Panama we call it provisional, right? So when you put in your first application, you get a provisional, which I guess is like temporary ID, right, for residency. And that's 2 years for most people. I came in as a spouse. And then you get, after the 2 years, you can qualify for permanent, right?
Right.
And then you have to it's up to 5 years before you can apply for citizen. Okay.
Exactly.
Can you?
Exactly.
Okay. So it's a little bit, I think it's a little bit longer in Costa Rica. Does the prices vary, Rafael? Like if they're coming in for temporary, like how does the prices work? Is it one, like is price like one major advantage from one option to the other?
From temporary or residency and citizenship, and
yes. Now, if I'm understanding correctly, you're saying that there's an option, right? So you're saying that you have to go through the temporary process, or are you okay? So you have to go through the temporary process,
correct,
and then you can apply for permanent resident after that. So correct. Okay, I thought you were saying that you could either apply for permanent or temporary as an option, but you have to.
It is the only option for obtaining permanent residency first is for parents of a Costa Rican born child. Anybody else, they need to do temporary residency first, and then 3 years later, they can obtain permanent if they want to. But if somebody would like to get like the permanent residency, so then they need to become temporary first.
What about if you get married? If you're married, like if you marry a Costa Rican, do you still have to do temporary, or do you go to permanent, or?
It is still temporary.
Still temporary, okay.
Kind of like perhaps the mentality of the legislator when they created the law is that perhaps, like you're a parent forever, like once a parent, always a parent.
Right.
All of the other categories, you can lose them at any time, and the marriage, yeah, it happens, but any of the other options, that's something that can be that can go away. So then the only option that will allow somebody to get permanent residency from the very beginning, is that one parent of a Costa Rican.
So let me ask this, and Giovanna, this is a question for me. Okay, so I came in as a spouse, and I think right now I'm a permanent resident. I have an e-cedula, and it's good for 5 years, right?
Yes,
So
10 years.
10 years, okay,
Mhm.
okay. So if Al and I break up, are y'all gonna throw me out of Panama?
No,
That's
no.
what I want to know.
No,
Do I
because
have
you
to be
already permanent.
married to be qualified for this particular e-cedula?
No, because you have permanent residency by resolution already. They cannot revoke that. No,
Thank
you
God,
you
because
don't
he
have
gets
to
on my
worry.
nerves sometimes.
No. If that happens in the middle, we had a problem, but not we're fine.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. And when you come in as a spouse, I think one of the most nerve-wracking things for me was actually the questions you have to answer. So I guess Panama wants to make sure that you're just not doing a marriage of convenience.
Do you really?
They'll ask you questions that only you would know if you're really together. And even though me and my husband have been together 20 something years, some of the questions was like, it's hard to remember. And I'm like, oh my God, I think if you get 4 wrong, they kick you out. They don't let you go forward.
Yes, they're very well trained to ask those tricky questions, but I think they know when they know if it's true or not, right?
So let me ask a question. So from start to finish, if you come in, you put in for your temporary or your provisional residency, it can take 2 years. It should take about 2 years for you to get your permanent residency in Panama.
Yeah, for the Friendly Nations visa, you get a 2-year provisional ID
Okay.
residency, and for the pensionado, it's more straightforward. The retirement type of visa, which is a permanent type of residency, you just get the provisional for 6 months, and you get permanent residency straight away without waiting those 2 years.
Oh,
that's an
okay.
advantage.
But you can't work or make any money, or did they recently change that?
You
For the
can work.
pensionado?
You can work and you can do business. There are no restrictions for doing business as a pensionado. You can have your own company and do business. And that is a type of work permit that is like a general type of permit for all type of permanent residencies and dependents as well. So a pensionado can apply for that type of work permit. It's a bit confusing because the law, the pensionados, for the discounts, there is a law for the discounts and benefits, and there is another one for them. And the other one mentions that they cannot work unless they work for their own company and for particular reasons. But a couple of years ago, they approved this type of work permit, and yes, a pensionado can apply for a work permit.
Pensionado is very popular amongst our group members. And you don't have to be, and the thing about pensionado is that you don't have to be like what we think about from the US. We think about pension, we think about retirement, we think about 60 and over or something like that. You don't have to be that age. You just have to have a pension or guaranteed income for the rest of your life, right?
Right. We had a lady, she was 35 years old and she applied a couple of weeks ago. And another one that is 40 for retired from military, from the army.
Yeah, we have a similar situation with pensionado too, don't we, Rafael? Age-wise?
There's not an age requirement. It's just the key requirement is demonstrating that the person has a pension for life, regardless where that comes from, and that that letter demonstrating that the person has that income, that pension for life. The letter has some very specific language. For instance, it must state that it is for life.
I think that also brings us to, you kind of touched on this too with the next question, which is about working. And I think maybe we could combine the can foreigners work with the can foreigners operate a business? Maybe we could answer those kind of, those two together.
Okay, and the work is very broad, and then for if somebody has a business, so naturally we would think like, okay, I'm working, I have a business, I'm working. So, but for immigration purposes, there is a big distinction, about what work means. So the on the one hand, being employed by somebody, so basically being an employee of a company and being put on payroll. So some categories of residency do not allow that. At least in Costa Rica, the restricted categories are some of these ones that we mentioned, the retired person, the rentista, the investor category. So these categories do not allow the, and strictly speaking about residency, there are so many other categories out there that we're not going to focus on today, but strictly speaking about residency, these three categories do not allow the person to be put on payroll. So they cannot go on and get a job in a company and get a salary, every 2 weeks or once a month. They're not allowed to do that legally. But it is possible for a person to open a business, and run that business, even though that's work. So if somebody is self-employed and has like let's say a consulting business or doing something like a digital creator or something like that, doing marketing or copywriting or these type of things, so they can open a business, register the business, pay taxes, and make money that way, but they cannot put themselves in payroll in that company because that is not allowed. And then also depending on some other type of businesses, like let's say like a brick and mortar businesses, that would be a difficulty. So while people are able to get to open a business and not be put in payroll, let's say that somebody opens a restaurant or a hotel or something like that, a boutique. So they can own it and they can run it, but then they cannot be the attendant, they cannot be the server, they cannot be the cook, they cannot be the host. These type of jobs are under Costa Rican law, like I said, reserved, and for somebody that gets either a work permit or is a Costa Rican or has a residence.
In Panama, we have job permits. The Friendly Nations has a type of work permit. It's for 3 years and can be renewed every 3 years. And the pensionado, as I mentioned before, there is a type of work permit as well. So there are some professions that are restricted. So a foreigner or cannot do in Panama, like being a lawyer, an accountant, a doctor, a nutritionist, psychology, all those health medical professions, engineering, accounting. But besides that, all types of jobs are available. And about operating, you mentioned operating a business as well. Foreigners can do business here as well. The only restriction is retail. Retail is prohibited, is only for Panamanians. So distributing, wholesale, services, online business, those are activities that can be done in Panama openly by non-nationals. And yes.
So you can do retail online. You could do retail online, but I couldn't open up a store.
Exactly. You cannot open up a store and sell small things and that products, let's say, directly to the consumer. Like, for example, in a shopping mall, unless you produce that product yourself. If you produce it yourself or fabricate it yourself and sell it, you can do that. Like you manufacture or produce something yourself manually. Or there are some exemptions, like, for example, there is a treaty with Panama and the United States on promotion, where, for example, if you establish here a huge company like PriceMart, you can do that, like Walmart and things like. I think they did it because maybe Walmart was coming, but that was like 10 years ago.
Man, I wish Walmart would come on. I mean, that is the one thing I miss about in Panama is no Walmart.
We do have Walmart.
What about the 90%? You got one in Costa Rica?
Oh yeah, we have Walmart.
Oh man, that's one for Costa Rica. Because there are none here that I know of in Panama. But can you just talk about the 90% rule here in Panama briefly?
Oh yes. We have that rule for personnel that works, foreigners that work in a Panamanian company. If you get a work permit that is under that rule, means that if you have a company with 10 Panamanians, only one non-national can work. But if you have the one for the friendly nations visa, that is non-considered under that rule. Because some type of job permits, yes, that's very interesting. That is a criteria that we have right now that might change in the future. We don't know, but it is, and it's really good for Italians, friendly nations, the ones with humanitarian reasons that are here as well. Those type of job permits do not count until that 10% of the that amount of foreigners that can work in Panama in a company.
Wow. I didn't know that. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I don't know how this applies to Panama is about medical services. What are the medical options for expats?
In Panama, we have Social Security, but you have to apply for a voluntary if you don't have a job or you are not affiliated under a work position. That type of Social Security gives you chance to get some of the medicines and also get consultant, go to a doctor by appointment and get some lab tests and visit a specialist as well. We have private insurance, which is what a lot of people do as well, because the private insurance is for you go to private and also clinics, so you have faster access to medical doctors and medicines and things like that. There are different type of medical options and clinics in Panama, and if you apply for private insurance, there are different type of coverage. You can apply until you're 70 years old. Of course, they will make checks on you on health and some tests and exams.
But I think as a whole, you shouldn't expect to come to Panama and have government covered medical. Is that fair to say?
Well, if you have a job and you have a job permit, you have to sign a work agreement, and it's mandatory to have to pay Social Security. It will be discounted from your salary.
Okay.
And then you have that right to go to social, and also your dependents, your parents and children or wife, if they don't have Social Security.
If you come and you're working. But let me just ask real quick, because a lot of people that come to Panama in our group are not coming to work. So how does Panama, I don't think there's anything they can expect as far as like medical coverage, as far as government, right? I mean, you can go to the public places, but
no, exactly, the hospitals, right,
yes.
Paying.
Or you can get your own policy, but you coming into Panama, don't expect the government to cover your medical in any way.
Do they recognize our Social Security can we use our Social Security in Panama? Or no?
No, I don't think
so.
No,
okay. You can't hardly use
Medicare, I think Medicare, there's some exceptions, but not as far as the Panama government. I mean, the question about the Panama, the government, nah.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to see because, you can't, when you have Social Security from the states, basically you're paying into the medical system, but generally speaking, in a lot of places you can't use it, but I was just wondering if in Panama, if you can use it, but I guess not.
No.
So what about, What about Costa Rica? Government medical
And Costa
services.
Rica has similarly a dual system. There is public and private. The I would say that the main difference is that the Costa Rican public system is mandatory. Everybody must pay into the system. So everybody, meaning that residents there, certainly Costa Rican citizens, they need to pay into it, primarily employees, like all employees must be enrolled in the social security system in Costa Rica. And then like as self-employed people, they should also get registered, but then like for foreign nationals, it is required for them also to get registered into the system, regardless of the category of residency or whatever other immigration status. Most of the other immigration status require getting registered. Naturally, like a tourist are not required, or these digital nomads that we were discussing earlier, like the categories of stays that are short-term stays, people are not required to get registered. Everybody else above that is required to be enrolled in the system and to pay. And so people who decide to use a private healthcare provider, they can do that, but the socialized system is not going to pay for that. The socialized system, the Social Security in Costa Rica has two components, one being retirement component, so people pay into it so that they can get a pension when they reach retirement age, and the other component is healthcare. So if people would like to receive healthcare services and they are in the socialized system, as it is mandatory, they can only go to one of the facilities that the system has. It is called, colloquially, it is called Caja. Caja basically means like a fund. So it is Caja in Costa Rica stands for for Costa Rican Social Security Fund. So that word Caja stands for fund. And so then the people, the fund itself, or Caja, it has its own network of hospitals and clinics, and they provide multiple health services, and also they provide treatment and medication, so on and so forth. But if somebody wouldn't like to use the private healthcare, the public healthcare system, the Caja, they can do private, but then they need to either pay out of pocket or get or have insurance. So that's like how basically the system works. People, the Caja, it is a curse and a blessing. From the perspective that the system is great by many standards, but it has a lot of issues. They are getting appointments. If somebody gets into an accident or has like a critical condition, the system works that way. They will take care of that emergency. But if somebody starts developing a condition, doesn't feel good, and needs to go and check it out, and getting, for instance, a referral to a specialist, that can take a long time, and so
sounds like the U.S.
So
Panama as well.
and another thing about it is let's say, while the bottom line quality of care might be very good, let's say that the experience might not be that great. That how perhaps the demeanor or the level of care in which people might be treated in Caja, that is a hit or miss. So and many facilities, there might be what is top of the art, I guess, or top of the line facilities, but there are many other state of the art, thank you. And another facilities, they might not be as sophisticated or well equipped. So again, it is like a hit or miss. So then people go, they play it by ear, whether they want to stay only in Caja, or they would like to pay a private healthcare provider or insurance. And the people who choose to do that, sometimes they ask like, can I stop paying caja since I'm not going to use it? And the answer is no, it is mandatory, everybody has to pay.
Like how much is it?
Depends.
It is based on income. There is a sliding scale, you know, and just recently it increased. And the sliding scale, it varies on income, but it goes like between 5% to 12%. The more money that you make, the higher the percentage that you need to pay into the system. Using as a reference, let's say that are the people that apply for residency as a retired person, people who have a pension, if we use the base income as a reference of $1,000, that income, somebody with that has like $1,000 in income ends up paying like about $150 a month in caja. People, for instance, that have the other residency that might be the rentista, that is $2,500 income, so that that caja can be about like somewhere between like $300 and $400. You know,
And that's
again,
that's required. That's
that is
required once
required.
you get that residency.
Correct. It is required. It is mandatory. So
Okay,
right now,
so-
like a lot of people are feeling this pain.
Yeah,
Yes,
it went
yes.
up a lot.
That's it. Now let me just stick on that for a minute. That's a very good point to make. So Giovanna, I mean, I haven't known anything like that. Panama doesn't have any requirements to pay for the public service? You don't have that requirement when you become a resident, huh?
No, it's not mandatory to become resident. It's mandatory if you are an employee or if you are a professional and make income and you declare taxes yearly, you have to pay that on your tax return, even though you're not an employee. But it's not linked to residency. It's more on income.
So it's based on income and you pay it as a tax?
Yes. Well, it's a different, there is like income tax and another one is Social Security, which is if you're a professional and you declare annual tax, is 50% of 13.5. It's like 7%, 7 to 8%, something like that. But if you are an employee, it's 9.75% for the employee and 12.50 for the employer.
And that's for public. That's for the public service.
Yes, public and retirement, like same as Costa Rica, both ways.
Oh,
Does
wow.
Panama have socialized medicine?
What is it? What is it?
Socialized? Is it? Do you have a system in Panama where the government covers the health of all of the citizens?
Yes, we have that. It's called Caja de Seguro Social.
Okay.
Yes, but it's the same like Rafael mentioned. It is, if you get if you want very quick service, you have to wait a couple of weeks for an appointment. If it's urgent, yes. Or if you have a lab, yeah, that might be fast. Like my parents live in the countryside of Panama and they use the Caja de Seguro Social all the time.
Okay.
Because it depends on the amount of people. But if you live in a big city, there's a lot of people and lines, and it will be taking a long time to get service.
I've heard some horror stories. I have definitely heard some horror stories. But what I like about Panama is that a lot of the expats, they buy private insurance. And the private insurance here is like you can get an insurance plan where it'll cover you for like major medical. Like if you have to spend time in the hospital or something like that. The thing that I think we also need to point out is always when we're talking about medical, is that medical doesn't cost what we think about. When we think about what we pay for things in the United States, I don't know about Costa Rica, but I know in Panama, it is just like, you are just like thanking God every day, if you have to go to the doctor, because some of the stuff that you get done here that you can afford without any financial burden or strain is stuff that might, really put you in a bind if you have to pay in the United States. So there's a big difference in the cost of medical care. So I see some people who always keep their insurance in the United States and they have connections still to the United States. So they go back and forth for things that they need, major medical or stuff like that. But they do keep a policy here in Panama for emergencies. so that they don't have to go to the public hospital if something happens.
Yeah, I think it's the same here basically in Costa Rica as well. It's very affordable to have your own, to self-insure. And for those of us who have residency, we have residency, but we also self-insure. So for some things, if we want to go to the Caja to get cheaper or free, we can do that. And then for other things, we can just self-insure. And Costa Rica is also a place where people go for medical tourism, dental tourism, because the same thing, the prices are a lot cheaper.
I'm starting to see more of that too.
Yeah. Rafael, let me ask you one question. I thought someone told me that once you got citizenship in Costa Rica, you don't have to pay into the Caja. Is that true or not true?
Legally, it is required to pay into Caja, but it is possible to terminate it. But something that I use frequently to explain some legal issues or challenges is that I say these two things. There is what the law says, and then there is what actually happens. And this could be like a very, very distinct things. But Caja in the Social Security in Costa Rica is mandatory, but for everybody. But once a person terminates the residency, it is possible with the termination of that residency to go and terminate Caja, because the Caja is attached to the residency. As it is a legal requirement to keep Caja, so then the person should keep paying to Caja. But the thing is that there is that, let's say, like a possibility, and just because like how the system actually works,
Right.
that once the person terminates the residency, they can terminate the Caja.
Okay.
But there's a couple of things that we didn't touch on that I want to definitely hit real quick.
Okay.
There was a particular question for Costa Rica, and the question was, what documentation is required for someone born in the borough of the Bronx? Is it true, Bronx, New York? Is it true that individuals born in one of the 5 boroughs of New York City need additional documentation? Do you know anything about that, Rafael?
Yes, indeed, and it's an excellent question. So, and perhaps let me ask you, Devon and Charlotte, where were you born? Perhaps if I can use that as a reference.
I was born in Kansas.
I was born in New Jersey.
Okay, all right. So the birth certificate itself doesn't have an additional requirement. The requirement comes with the authentication. So let me elaborate. And this can also be true even like in the event that it is not specific to Costa Rica. It is mainly specific to New York. So people that even will obtain residency in Panama, that they will be bringing children, so they need to produce even like a birth certificate for their children, to demonstrate the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So the situation is this, that this topic, most of the time, nobody knows about it until they become an expat, because they were not confronted with this reality that I need to authenticate a document to go to another country. So there is this specific word called apostille. An apostille is an authentication for a document to be used in another country. So then in this case, like either from New Jersey or Kansas or New York, somebody will need to produce a local document, like in this example, a birth certificate. And if you're going to need to use it abroad in another country, they need to do this authentication that is called apostille. So somebody from New Jersey or Kansas, they can send that document directly, the birth certificate, to the Department of State of that state, the Secretary of State or the Department of State of that state to get it authenticated. And in the case of New York, and in this particular area, the 5 boroughs, there are additional requirements for that authentication. To put it perhaps in New Jersey or Kansas terms, that means that instead of sending it directly to the Secretary of State, it requires an authentication at the local county. You know, it has to go to the county clerk to authenticate the document, and then it is sent to the Department of State. So specifically talking about New York, in the 5 boroughs, it has to go to the county clerk there in New York City, and they will put an authentication to that birth certificate. And then after that, it can be sent to the New York Department of State. That specific authentication at a local level with the county clerk, it is called exemplarization. I think that's the name for it, like exemplification, excuse me. It is called an exemplification letter. So then the county clerk puts a stamp in there saying that that document issued in either of the 5 boroughs over there in downstate, that document is authentic. And then once that's done, it can be sent to the Secretary of State of New York, whether in Albany or there in New York City, in William Street. There is an office there, a local office. So then they will send it there to get that authentication, and then it can be used in Costa Rica or in any other country that uses the apostille.
Wow. So it is just a requirement, a New York requirement.
Correct.
So there was one other thing that we skipped over, and I think we need to definitely address very quickly, is taxes. So when Giovanna, when you come into Panama as a resident, what should you expect with regard to tax liability, and how does that change when you become a citizen? Is that just like all over the board, depending on how you come in?
That's a good question. Panama has a particular, I believe, like similar to Costa Rica type of tax system, which is territorial. It's based on source. So everyone that makes income based on the source, meaning that income generated in the Panamanian territory has to pay taxes.
Okay.
If you make foreign income, that foreign income is exempt. So it means that you don't have to pay taxes on that income. We have VAT, which called ITBMS, which is 7%, and that is like for everybody that consume goods or services.
EBT. Did you say
ITBMS?
TBMS, that's what I see on all my receipts.
Yes, it's similar to VAT.
Okay, so that 7% is across the board.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the 7% is a sales tax as well as income tax?
No, it's sales tax. Income tax is separate. It's 15. It's the first 11,000 is exempt for physical persons and individuals, and then there's a threshold. From 11,000 to 50,000 is 15%, and then up to 50,000 is 25%. And then for companies, it's 25% in general. But we have some tax incentives for small businesses, so that can apply to get a lower rate.
So then if the maximum is like 25% in Panama,
yes.
And if you have foreign income, then some of that is exempt. Is it like up to,
yes.
like, is it like up to?
Altogether.
Altogether.
No, all foreign income is exempt. Yes. There are some exemptions, like if a foreign company comes to Panama and offers services, then we have to maybe retain an amount of 12.5%. But if you're here and you have other income elsewhere, not in Panama, we won't tax on that. It's different from like most of the countries in the world that tax on the worldwide income, like United States.
So that's an incentive. That's an incentive for people who want to evade taxes. Not me. I'm saying other people.
Asking
other countries like Europeans and Latin American countries. Yes, it's very attractive because it's based on residency. So they changed residency to Panama to get those incentives.
Okay.
Not America. That's different.
Rafael, same question for Costa Rica.
It's pretty much the same. Costa Rica doesn't tax foreign income. There has been an attempt by the Costa Rican government to tax foreign income, but primarily targeted to Costa Ricans, not necessarily to foreigners. But that attempt, like they put a bill in Congress, it didn't pass. The bill was not very well drafted, so it didn't pass Congress. But at this point, Costa Rica does not tax foreign income at all. It only for income taxes, it only taxes the income generated in Costa Rica.
This is just a totally amazing conversation. And we've gotten a lot of good nuggets. And I know we've asked a lot of extra questions, which is great. That's because we've learned a lot today ourselves. And that means that we're learning, that means that everybody that's listening in is going to learn too. So what we're going to do now to wrap it up, we're going to just ask you to touch on a few things at the same time. And those things are going to be, the question is banking for foreigners, buying land or property for foreigners, and what do you think the perks are for becoming a resident of Costa Rica or Panama respectively? So I'm going to start with Giovanna. Go.
Okay, 2 minutes. About banking requirements, okay, a good positive thing is that tourists, when entering Panama, they can open a bank account as well. So you don't have to wait to be a resident. Some banks will ask for the resident ID, but if you want to open a bank account, it is possible. The minimum amount goes from 50 to 100 USD. Mm-hmm. And most of the banks, they have online banking. Some of them have online banking in English, which is very convenient. You can transfer money from the US to Panama and Panama to, and withdraw money from here, which is very convenient. Also about purchasing property, and in all non-nationals can buy property. There are no restrictions, but the area on the borders of Colombia and Costa Rica, that's not allowed, some area. But the rest is okay. Some parts of the near the beach, the 12 kilometers and some kilometers on the Caribbean and Pacific is also a part that belongs to everybody, so cannot be bought either. But after 200 kilometers, I believe, from the Pacific and 176 from the Caribbean, that you can buy from the beach area, and the rest is okay. But if the area is restricted, like for how to say, like a national park or an area that is restricted, yeah, that cannot be bought. And about the perks for expats about Panama, I would say that what most people like about Panama is that the location is very good. It's in the center. We have the USD, and there are it's very easy to do business here. You can have a company, Panama Corporation, open it in 3 to 4 working days, and the setup is very quickly. We don't have so many taxes, like procedures that are bureaucracy for that, like in other countries in Latin America. And the benefits and incentives, discounts for seniors, retirees are really good. Like you can find 50% off on entertainment activities when you go to the movies, sport games, entertainment. You get 25% on tickets, flight tickets, public transportation, on restaurants, hotels. You can get also even up to 50% on hotels. And since you establish here and you're a retiree, you can fly, you can, travel and get those discounts around the country, and when you travel, and get also discounts on medicine and consultation, professional services, and also some benefits when you get mortgages with banks and some medical services.
Oh, that's good stuff. Let me just real quick, mortgages. So when we talk about banking, it's a little difficult for people to come in, for foreigners to get mortgages, isn't it? In Panama.
Yes, it is a process. Yes, they need to show the income, and they will check also the credit score as well. So yes, it is possible, but they will check and ask for documents in order to prove income and make sure that all the requirements and forms are complied. Yes, they
Okay.
require 30% also on down payment. 20 to 30%.
Gracias.
You know.
Rafael.
All right, so banking property and perks. Starting perhaps with the bad news, there are no perks, maybe. And and at the moment, Costa Rica, they passed a law that allows for, it generates like some tax exemptions for the importation of vehicles and household goods. The law was passed, but it hasn't been regulated, so it's not active. That I would say that that's primarily the only perk, but it's still pending. It is not fully active at the moment. Then when it comes to banking, it is possible, this depends on the bank. According to Costa Rican regulations, it is possible to open a bank account being a tourist with just the passport, but then banks, they have their own policies, and some banks might not open an account, other banks will. And the banks that are open accounts, the accounts are restricted. Restricted in two ways. You cannot do transfers between banks because it is required to have a local ID to do that. So if somebody has a passport, then it is not possible to identify the account in the other bank. And also there is another restriction in relation to how much money you can have in the bank. Naturally, once the person becomes a resident, so then it is possible to do bank transfers or to leave the restrictions in the amount of money allowed to use in the bank. And then about property, there's no restriction for foreigners to own property in Costa Rica. This is an important, perhaps, detail. At a constitutional level, foreigners have all of the same rights as Costa Rican under the Constitution. Like all of the guarantees that are established in the Constitution for Costa Ricans apply for foreigners, with the exception of being elected for public office or voting. Those are basically the exceptions. So having said that, it is possible to obtain property, and there's no restriction on that. The Costa Rican property laws are very similar to those in the US about the type of titles that people can get, like a co-tenancy, spouses can obtain property as a couple, so on and so forth. And there are, similar to Panama, there are restrictions, and Costa Rica is very protective of the sea, the rivers, the mountains. So there are restrictions when it comes to how close people can own property to the beach, or to a river, and or to national parks, so on and so forth. But when it comes to title, there's no restriction on that. People can acquire a property just with their passport. And then about mortgages, that's up to the bank. But broadly speaking, banks do not offer mortgages to residents, to temporary residents, only to permanent residents. And it is required, obviously, because of their own banking policies or guidelines, to be able to demonstrate that the person is subject to credit, that is going to be able to pay the mortgage. It is possible to obtain mortgages from private lenders, but the problem with that is that the interest rates are very, very high. So once the person qualifies for a mortgage from a regular bank, the interest rates are more reasonable. But that would be available primarily for people with a permanent residency.
Yes. And yes, that's kind of similar to Panama. It looks like cash is king here when it comes to making these investments. But that was some very, very, very good information. And as we're about to part, let me just start with Rafael. Can you tell us how to reach you in Costa Rica?
The best way will be to reach our website. It is outlierlegal.com, or also our Facebook page that is similarly Outlier Legal. And that would be, I would say that the best way to do it. We can be reached by phone in Costa Rica, but for folks that are in the US, Dialing international might be a little more complicated. So the best thing to do would be to reach us by our website. We have a form and they can send us a message there. And somebody will be able to reply directly to that email or to give a call back.
And
We'll put your links in there too.
Yeah, when we do the YouTube, we'll be sure to put the links for your contact information.
Giovanna?
Oh, you're muted.
We have a website, the Prime Solutions Tax and Legal, and our email as well is possible. We are on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, so you can find us easily.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, you guys. This has been eye-opening and so informative. I'm so impressed with the information that we got, and this is also helping me because a lot of times in the groups and people who are trying to come in, they're asking questions and they think we have all the answers, right? So this will equip us with more information that we can impart to people that come to our groups, visitors, and those that are thinking of relocating. So thank you so much for your time. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us over.
Yes, thank you. It's very interesting.
We'll let you go now.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, Devin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Giovanna, very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Bye-bye, Rafa.